Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will arrive in New Delhi this evening as part of his 3-day visit to India. This is the first high-level engagement between India and the United States after the Modi government returned to power for a second term last month. The visit comes ahead of a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the Group of 20 summit in Japan later this week, and at a very crucial time in the relationship between India and the United States. Now, while ties have improved significantly in the last few years, there are sticking points on trade, H-1B visas, Iran, and a weapon systems purchase from Russia. How much will these issues dominate the conversation? To speak on this, I'm joined now by Meera Shankar, former ambassador to the United States, and I'm also speaking today with Indrani Bagchi, the diplomatic editor for the Times of India. Welcome to the both of you, and thank you for speaking with us. Ms. Shankar, just first, let's begin with your opening comments on the significance of Pompeo's visit.
I think it's important because it's the very first engagement between the United States and the Modi government after the election. So it will set the tone for the relationship. There has not been much interaction substantively in the run-up to the election, and there are several issues which have accumulated where there are differences between the two sides or divergences of opinion, and both sides need to engage as to how they are going to work through these issues, and these are both political and strategic, such as how to deal with Iran or Russia, the arms sales from Russia, and also economic and trade issues where their frictions seem to have increased. It'll also set the ground for the interaction between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump in Osaka, and I think it's important that this is well prepared and that there are no surprises, because sometimes I think the unpredictability of President Trump's interactions can throw off a lot of his interlocutors. So if it's well prepared, the chances of surprises are less.
Absolutely. Indrani, we spoke last week, in fact, about the relationship between India and the United States because of the H-1B visa issue. Soon after our conversation, the United States came and said, we're not talking about India, we're looking at general curbs on H-1B visa, etc. What is the sense and tone from what Washington is saying right now? Because they seem to be taking turns, blow hot, blow cold, talking tough, and also reiterating the partnership that both the countries have.
Well, I think the dissonance on the H-1B visas or on trade have threatened to sort of overshadow the positives of the relationship, and I think that's something they want to emphasize. On the H-1B visas, I think the U.S. State Department official clarified that there were no caps on H-1B visas planned in retaliation for against data localization rules in India. That having been said, the Trump administration has been trying to put caps on the H-1B visas anyway, and it's frankly it's not just Trump, it's every U.S. administration prior to Trump too have tried to put caps on H-1B visas, which of course affects Indians most, because about 75% of those visas go to Indians. But it's not a question of them blowing hot, blowing cold. This is a question of who is quoted. For instance, the story that sort of set fire on the H-1B visa issue last week was sourced to an unnamed official, and now our sources in Washington say that that they were Indian officials, but Indian officials are very clear that this was a sort of leak by unnamed US officials. So this kind of going back and forth between governments, especially when there is a contentious trade relationship, I think will happen. The fact remains that there has been no change really in the H-1B visa system, and if there is any change, it will have to come from the US Congress, not really from the US administration.
Absolutely, but you know, Indrani, it's not just about H-1B visa issues, is it? That was more symptomatic of the larger sort of sticking points in the relationship, and we've spoken about trade. That is one. Iran is one, especially in light of the kind of you know, tough talk from the Trump administration. Though of course we've agreed to some demands on our oil imports, but there are still some lacunae there. And then, of course, let's talk a bit about the report from the US State Department that came over the weekend, questioning the Modi government on the status of minorities in the country. The timing of all of these important before these major talks?
Yes. So if you let's just go back to Iran and Russia for a moment. On Iran, as you know very well, I think we've stopped oil imports from Iran. On Russia and on the S-400 missile defense system, which the US is objecting to, I don't see any Indian government giving in to US objections. I think Indian governments will continue with their defense relationship with Russia that exists today, and I don't see any give by the Indians on S-400. On the religious freedom report, it is egregious, but it happens every year, and frankly I think there would be a very good report that Indians or anybody else can write about religious freedom issues in many parts of the world. So, so going after the current government and the ruling party, which in a report which is mandated by Congress, it's almost, I would actually compare it to the OIC statement on India and Kashmir. Because it happens with depressing regularity, even though you have good relations or improving relations with almost all the OIC countries. And in this case, you have a deep strategic partnership with the US, but neither side, none of this seems to matter when they issue reports of the kind that we saw over the weekend. But I do believe that reports like that are damaging in terms of optics, and they're also extremely egregious. I don't see why Indian government of any variety should take any notice of them.
Ms. Shankar, let me come to you with those very same points. And as Ms. Indrani Bakshi said correctly, that on Iran, we sort of seem to have taken the United States point of view, though we are still asking for waivers. Do you see these 2-3 issues as dominating the talks that Pompeo will have in the day to come? And what are the kind of signals that are coming from Washington? Because the Trump administration across the board wants to be known for tough talk. But with India specifically, there is also a need to balance China. Which one do you think will outweigh?
Well, I think that, you know, the overall strategic relationship is quite robust in terms of east of India and the Asia Pacific. I think we have to work our way through differences, but clearly, you know, no Indian government is going to give the US a veto over its relationship with Russia. It's not just a question of the S-400. It is a question of, you know, a country with which we have had a strategic relationship for many years. And I don't think that, every single procurement from Russia will entail, really getting US permission. So that is something we need to work through. Secondly, I think on the trade side, frictions have really grown, and I would disagree a bit with Indrani, because while there have been no legislative changes to the H-1B program, through executive orders outside the legislature, it has been made far more complex and difficult for people to get Indian companies to get H-1B visas. The process has become longer, it's become more unpredictable, there are more rejections. Spouses of H-1B visa holders will no longer be able to work, and so on. So there are a series of steps which have been taken through executive action which make it more difficult for our companies to get H-1B visas. So that is something which from our side really is on the table. Even if there is no cap, as Mr. Pompeo said, the whole scheme has become very much more or very much less friendly for our companies, and it erodes their competitive edge. So it's an issue which we have from our side on the table, as also the withdrawal of GSP benefits for our exports. And there are a range of other issues. So I suppose really we need to engage and see how, through a process of give and take, we can address some of these trade frictions which have come to the fore in recent months. There are many issues from the US side, there are many issues from the Indian side, and I think engagement to see where it's possible to move ahead. Clearly there are areas where India will dig its feet in and find it difficult to move. For instance, dairy imports from the US, where the US refuses to certify that their cows have not been fed with non-vegetarian or meat-based products. So for Indians, given the sensitivity of this issue, it becomes extremely difficult. So I don't want to go into the detail, but I think we have to look at how we carry the strategic relationship forward, and at the same time that strategic relationship does not in a way constrain our relationship with our other strategic partners, and how we work through some of these trade frictions.
Absolutely. Indrani, you want to come in on some of those points that Ms. Meera Shankar has raised?
No, I agree with everything that Meera has said, and I do believe that yes, it has become a lot more difficult for H-1B visa applicants. Despite that, however, I think we still take about 75% of them, and from what we hear, a number of Indian companies have actually changing their business model in a way. So the thing about H-1B visas, you have an opportunity to think about whether it should be part of a larger deal that we can work out with America on trade, on economic issues, on investments, on movement of skilled professionals. Trump himself wants to make the visa issue more of a skilled professional visa program, much like the Australian or the Canadian. And even there, I think the Indians will be the ones far ahead of everybody else to get to America with their skills.
So I get
yes, but I do agree with everything that.
No, I get your point. And for a long time, H-1B visas, though in the larger picture, it's a very small part of the puzzle, has dominated the conversation between India and the United States. There's so much more on the table. Just one last word from you, Indrani, in terms of the kind of perception or the kind of focus that Modi 2.0 will also take? Because what we've seen very quickly in the last 1 month is Piyush Goyal, for example, responding to the withdrawal of GSP benefits, saying that we need to work out our own competitiveness. The retaliatory tariffs that finally came post-elections. So is there going to be a stronger, more confident response as well to the United States, which will negotiate hard?
Well, certainly. I mean, I think India actually has a fairly strong case. India's, I mean, yes, they can go after India on certain tariff issues, but you also have to look at the fact that we are a $2.9 trillion economy and America is an $18 trillion economy. That is, we are 1/6 the size. So honestly, for the US to badger us on a whole lot of trade and tariff items is I don't think is acceptable. And if you look at what the Foreign Minister Jaishankar said today, that he actually wants to take a much more diplomatic approach, and he believes that diplomacy is really the way to resolve the issues that have cropped up on the trade front between the US and India, and he confirmed that trade would actually be one of the top items on his discussions with Mike Pompeo tomorrow morning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that expert view. Meera Shankar and Indrani Bagchi there filling us in on what we can expect over the next 3 days. What finally comes out of this visit, we'll have to wait and see, and we'll analyze it right here on the India Development Debate.